All right, everybody, thanks for your patience. How are you this January? I love that background by Marie with the basketballs. That's really great. Thank you so much for coming today. This is the IBO Women's Coordinating Committee meeting, one of our 4 educational sessions. We're really excited to have you here on Sunday afternoon. Maybe some of you gave up a game today to come just to this very meeting. So we're really appreciative of that and appreciative of your time. My name is Carrie Dunning. I'm the assistant chair for the WCC. I'm also the director of education for WCBU, the college board that IBO has instituted. And I'm happy to introduce to you our special guest today. We have Valerie Light is the chair of the WCC. Bob Grady is the second assistant chair, and we have a really special guest presenter a little down the road. We can't wait for you to hear that topic. I've seen it live and it was really fantastic. And I think it's completely appropriate for a conference play since we're in mid-January. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Valerie Light, our chair of the committee, and she will take it forward to our presentation.
All right. Again, thank you all for being here. I first want to start in honoring Dr. Martin Luther King. Tomorrow is the celebration of his birth. I just want to start with a quote. King understood the importance of being touched by emotions and grace. He was a master of emotional intelligence that recognized anyone was capable of driving powerful change. In other words, there are no barriers to entry. We can all be the change we want to see in the world. And that's what WCC is doing right now. We're trying to be the change that we want to see in our world, in our community, in IBO, on our boards, locally, nationally, okay? So I'd like to encourage you all to encourage other members on your board to join the WCC. We need 2 members from each board on nationally. In addition, we'd like you to talk to the women on your board about attending these meetings. We meet quarterly to introduce topics that members can take and use to improve their officiating as well, and also help to build networking opportunities. We're always looking for topics to share. So if you or any of your members have a topic they would like to hear more about or help with, please email us at the wcc@iabo.org. The email is in the email that you received from Donnie, and Carrie will also put it in the chat. We're also going to put a Google Forms link that you can share with other members on your board who may be interested in participating in WCC. So my second thing I want to talk about is the IBO Spring Business Meeting, which is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania this year. It's April 26th to the 30th. It's a business meeting, so not as exciting as the fall meeting because that's where you get all the goodies, but it's something to experience. You can find the hotel information in the sportorial or inside the lines. Hotel reservations are open as we speak. Next, I'd like to ask that you all take a minute and think about joining your board committees. And I'm specifically speaking to younger officials and female officials. You know, it's important to have representation, and it's also a great way to become more familiar with how the board operates, right? It's hard to go in to help improve or make changes if we're not sure of how things work. So enough of that. The main purpose of this meeting is for the presentation. So during the fall IBO meeting, Charlene Shepard presented The Mental Game, Dealing with Pressure and Criticism. And on our ride home, I asked her if she would be willing to present to this group? And she said, yes, which I didn't doubt she would, but you know, I'm polite. I asked her, but I didn't expect any other response. And that is who she is, a consummate teacher and mentor to IBO members. Charlene is a Board 6 interpreter. Board 6 is in Connecticut. 17-year IBO official and has been officiating for more than 20 years and worked the last 10 Connecticut State Tournament Championship games. This is not just a presentation. This is something she models and teaches to all our board members. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Her presentation is awesome. Charlene, take it from here.
All right, thank you all so very much for being here, and Happy New Year to you all. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you today to be able to share this presentation with you. As I stated when I was asked to do the presentation this fall, this past fall, I should say, I was a little bit surprised when the 4 co-coordinators came to me and said, we'd like for you to do a presentation, but we're not going to have you talk about anything that has to do with on the court in terms of coverage area or contact or mechanics or signals. We want you to talk about the one aspect of the game that everyone experiences but doesn't really feel comfortable talking about. And that is pressure and criticism that comes from being on the court. And that pressure is not just pressure that comes from your schedule and your assigner, but it comes from working with other officials. It comes from coaches that are trying to win. It comes from players that are working really hard on the court, but more importantly, it comes from ourselves, our own expectations of where we want to be, how we want to be as officials. So I thought it was very apropos for us to start having this conversation in the fall, at the fall conference with interpreters. I subsequently did this presentation as well in Washington, D.C. a few months after that for their fall meeting and interpretation meeting. And so I am all but thrilled to be able to present this here today for the Women's Coordinating Committee. So the things that we're going to talk about have to do with, as I said, the mental game. And this book, The Mental Game, 90% Mental, is the book that I base my presentation on. It was written by Bob Tewksbury, who was a former pitcher in the major leagues. And as we all know, anytime you get to the professional level of work, whether it's in football or baseball or basketball, we know that there's a high level of stress that comes with those games. Doesn't matter what position you're in, but specifically with baseball, a lot rides on whether or not your team is good based on what the pitchers can and cannot do. And so Bob Tewksbury, who actually had a very nice, not outstanding, but a very nice Major League Baseball career, went on to become a mental skills coach. He actually got his educational training in psychology, specifically sports psychology. And he actually went back as a former pitcher and started working with new pitchers that were coming up in the league and talking to them about the things that they do. How do they prepare for games is important. What do they do in the off season? That's important. But more importantly, what do you do when you're in the game, that big game that you finally get assigned, and you now feel all that undue stress and undue pressure to be able to perform at that high level and not wanting to mess up and not wanting to be the weak link in your crew and all that other stuff. So if you actually get a chance to read the book, it is a great read. Again, he talks about it from a pitching perspective, but it is very apropos to any level of sports, and primarily for officiating, because again, we tend to be very self-critiquing as officials. The very best officials at very high levels are very good at taking criticism from their assigners and their evaluators and their other crew members. I think we are doing a better job of it on the high school level, but I think it's something that some of our high school officials still struggle with, because we all want to feel like we do a good job, but it's hard sometimes to hear that we can do better. And I think if you are, as an official, looking to go to a higher level, wherever that level is for you, you have to be able to hear the constructive criticism, and then you have to be willing to do something with it. And so those are the two takeaways that I want everyone to leave with today. So we're going to start off today talking about what it actually means to be mentally tough. I'll talk a little bit about stress and what it is, and then we'll talk about the connection between what happens in your mind and your body and your thinking in terms of stress, because stress manifests itself in a ton of ways, and it varies from person to person. We'll talk a little bit about what then happens specifically with your thinking when you're overly stressed, and how that then will add to pressure, and then how that adds to criticism, again, both on a self level and external levels. And then what we need to do as officials to develop some stress management skills, so that we know the stress is going to come and the critique is going to come, but then what do we do with it once it's there? And then we'll talk about some ways that we can engage in some self-care, because if you beat up on yourself a little bit, even if you beat up on yourself physically, a nice hot shower or a bath or an ice bath, whatever it is, a massage, it will help you kind of come back down the baseline so that you can reach that high level again in the next game that you have to get up for. So we'll talk about some ways that we can develop some self-care so that ultimately you can reach your goal or the potential that you want to tap into for yourself. So what does it mean to be mentally tough? Well, we know that if you've ever competed in sports, whether you are a player or a coach or as an official, we know competitive sports are meant to be intense and very exciting. And the higher the level that you get to, the more fast-paced it's going to be. And we also know that when we become students of the game, and I did say this in the fall presentation, that Allen Iverson actually got it right when the reporter asked him about practice. Why wasn't he coming to practice? And his response was, practice? We're talking about practice? Like, what's practice? But we all know, if you've been a player or you've been a coach, practice is what actually gets you ready for competition. And my coach used to always say, practice like you play. Because if you do that, then what ultimately happens is when you actually get out on the court for the real game, your body is going to do all the things that you've already been doing, all that muscle memory. It's going to kick into play. It's very difficult to practice one way and then kick into gear and something clicks and you play another way. Very few people can do that. So most of us become students of the game and sharpen our skills by practice. And so as official, we practice by reading the rule book, watching other games, watching film of games. We ask questions, we review exams, we do all that kind of stuff so that we are at our best, at our optimal best, so that when it's time to step out on the court, we're ready for whatever level of competition we're going to be partaking in. We don't want to get there and then be caught off guard by anything that's going on. However, no matter how ready and prepared you are, we also know that you have to balance that out with rest. And you have to rest yourself physically, and you have to rest yourself emotionally, and you have to rest yourself mentally. Because when you don't rest, you're going to find yourself unbalanced. And when you are out of whack, when you're off kilter, that's when you're going to feel the stress and the pressure that much more. And when you feel that stress and pressure, it's going to always divert you away from what your intended goal is. And that's what becomes critical to your performance. So we want you to have your own path and your own goals. And as I said in the fall presentation, any official that says to you, I'm trying to get here, you don't hear that kind of talk, then that should be concerning, because whether we have a goal for that specific game or a quarter of the game, whether it's I want to work on having sharp skills, sharp signals, sharp mechanics, I want to make sure I'm getting to the reporting box, I want to work on my communication with the table and the coaches, whatever that is, you want to make sure you have a path and a goal and that you're doing everything that you can to achieve that. And what we have to get away from as officials is comparing ourselves to others, because what we may or may not know is what that other official has had to work hard to do to get to where they are. And so have your own path, have your own goals, be okay with that. Be okay with sharing that with other officials when you're working night by night, letting them know what you're looking to achieve. That's the kind of stuff that will help you get to where you need to go. So when you know what it takes to be mentally tough, do you then have to ask yourself, are you in fact tough? And what does that actually mean? What does it mean to you as an individual? What does it mean to you as a member of your board and your organization? What does it mean to you as a part of that crew on the court that night? What does it mean to be tough? And so things that you have to ask yourself, well, what do you do after you make a bad call? Do you sulk? Do you disappear for the rest of the game and now your partner's officiating by themselves? What do you do when the coach specifically yells at you, calls you by name and says, hey, Valerie, what's up with that call? What was that? I didn't see that contact. I didn't see that travel. What do you do? What do you do when the crowd boos your call? Are you influenced or impacted by what the crowd thinks about you? Or do you just understand that, hey, crowds have their own agenda, and we'll talk about them a little bit later this afternoon. But again, remember, the fans are there to cheer for their team. Their goal is to make sure their team wins. So anytime you are blowing the whistle and the call goes against their team, of course they're not going to like your call. But how do you handle that? What do you do with that when you hear it? All right. What do you do when you're not getting the big game on your schedule? Whether you're not getting the big game at all, or you're not getting the big game anymore, because that time also comes for all of us as an official. Can you pick yourself up after there's been some kind of real or perceived failure? Right? So we know as human beings that there is stress everywhere in our lives, and stress in and of itself is a mental or emotional strain on you, on your personal self, resulting from something adverse or very demanding. So what happens is something externally or internally happens, and now your body's got to start to prep and prepare for, how are we going to do with this? Okay. And as I said before, stress is universal. There's not a person on the planet that can say they've never been stressed. We all have it. And it's not necessarily a bad thing either. If you've ever gone for a job promotion and you said to yourself, I really want to work here, or I really want to be in this new position, or I really want to be a supervisor, you feel some semblance of stress, some butterflies in your stomach the night before, or even a little bit before that interview. That's stress. And that's a good thing, because if you walk into that interview not feeling any semblance of stress, then you might be a little bit overconfident. And then ultimately, if you find out that you didn't get the promotion, then you're going to feel some level of stress, because you're going to beat yourself up about what I could have said, what I didn't say, how I could have said it, how I could have dressed, or wherever that case may be. So stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It is sometimes a very good thing for us. But in terms of athletics and sports, stress gets us in a ready state. As I said before, it tells us we need to do something to be ready to perform and to be ready to answer or deal with something that might come up that does not routinely happens. All right. But if stress starts to negatively impact your game, you need to find a way to intervene. You don't want to be bringing that onto the court and into your crew. So we know what stress is. Well, what are the general signs of stress? How do you know that you are feeling or experiencing some stress? Stress generally manifests itself in 4 ways. The first way is cognitively, and that's when you start to have difficulty concentrating or making decisions. You start to over worry. You have difficulties remembering or recalling information. So again, anytime you've ever blown the whistle and then forget what you're going to signal, or you make the call, you have a strong call on the foul, then you run all the way over to the reporting area, and then you forget who you're calling the foul on. Okay, so that could be a little bit of stress manifesting itself. Again, not that big of a deal, but we don't want it happening all the time. Second way stress will get manifested is emotionally. We start to get angry or irritable. We feel some level of sadness that kind of lasts for a while. We feel depressed. Our self-esteem and our motivation levels are impacted, and we start to get self-critical. And again, self-criticism isn't bad. Being overly self-critical is. And so now, as I said before, what do you do when the coach specifically calls you out? Can you respond to the coach appropriately? Can I say to the coach, hey, coach, when I get onto your side of the court, I'll come over and talk to you? Or do we whack the coach with the T because they pointed out a mistake that we might have just had? Okay, that's when stress starts to exhibit itself in a very negative manner. The third way stress will manifest itself is physically. Now we're feeling the lingering muscle tension or exhaustion. We feel fatigued and we don't even know why. You're saying to yourself, I'm tired and I probably need to give back a couple of games this week, but you can't even explain to yourself why you're tired, why you're not feeling well, okay? So again, stress becomes an issue when you start to turn back all those games, when you're becoming less available, when you can't get up and down the court. That's when the stress is becoming an issue physically. And then the last way stress will manifest itself is behaviorally. And this is the way that more often or not, we start to see it in each other and we'll start to ask questions. And this is behaviorally, where we start to see a decline in a performance. So I'm used to working with a certain official. I know what that official brings when they come out on the court with me. And now within the first 2 or 3 minutes of the game, I'm thinking to myself, and I'm just using this as an example, while I've had a couple of games with Val, this is not like her. She's missing some easy calls, or she's snapping at players, she's snapping at coaches. That's not like her. She's usually very mild mannered. So we start to see the behavioral manifestation in officials in terms of stress. And so again, if you start to see any of these signs in yourself, take a step back and start to evaluate what's going on, what's on your mind, what's taking place in your life, because it may not be basketball related. It could be your job. It could be your relationship. It could be your children. It could be anything. But again, just remember that stress at some point in time will begin to manifest itself if you don't address it. So again, stress can be positive or negative. And if you don't address it, it's going to lead to more undue pressure and stress about your own performance. Ultimately, what happens is, if you carry your stress out onto the court, you're going to start to process the game through a negative lens. So you make a call, and now you hear a reaction from the crowd, or you hear a question by the coach, and now you're second guessing yourself, or even worse, you're talking to yourself like, why is the coach giving me a hard time tonight? What's wrong with the crowd? Why don't they like that call? You will start to see the game through a very negative lens, and that's not where you need to be on the court, because we know that your mind and your body are not separate. They are very much incorporated to work together. And when things start to impact your mind, they will start to impact your body. And that is because the stress is starting to take over. Ultimately, what happens is, when you get to that point in place, your thinking starts to stink. All right. So what happens with your stinking thinking? Again, when you're processing through a very negative lens, when you're seeing everything as the glass is half empty as opposed to half full, your thoughts become distorted. They're unhealthy. Even more so, they're unnecessary. And again, as I said before, this is not just relegated to us as officials. A lot of times when you hear those parents screaming up in the stands and they're questioning your calls or whatever, some of it is just they're not very good at being good fans, but some of them is because they've allowed themselves to get some undue stress built up, because in their mind, they're thinking, you made a call, that call goes against their child, and every time you make a poor call against their child, some college scout may see that tape and may think that that kid is not appropriate for their program. They may not get the scholarship, and now how are we going to pay for college? So again, stinking thinking is not just relegated to us as officials. It is impacting the fans, it's impacting the players, it's impacting the coaches, it's impacting us all. But we, as guardians of the game, have to do something to make sure we're not bringing that stress onto the court. And so when I talked before about having goals, about having a path that you want to reach, there's a phrase of striving for perfection. And that's good, because when we're striving for something, that means we are focused on the steps that are needed for us to reach our goal, or we turn into a perfectionist. And perfectionism is not good, because you have to be overly critical of yourself to say, I should have done this to reach the goal, but it might be a step that's unattainable or unreachable or unfathomable. And what tends to happen is, if you get yourself to a point or a place where you're striving for perfectionism, then what happens is you move away from your goal because you start trying to do things that aren't necessary in the game. You become the partner people don't want to work with. You become the official that coaches become very critical of, not just to your face, but they're also contacting your assigner and saying, I don't want to see them in my gym anymore. And now you're not understanding why your game schedule is changing. So when your thought process is off and you're not making good connections between what has happened and what I should do, then that stinking thinking starts to take over. And when it starts to take over, it's going to impact everything that's going on. So now when you're in this frame of mind, what do you do when the assigner stops giving you the big game? Because we all know the higher the stakes, the bigger the game, the bigger the arena that you're working in, the more fans that are there that night, there's going to be more emotion and anxiety that comes along with it. And if you are not in a good reference, a good place of mind, then you're going to expend all your energy on all the wrong things, because you got yourself ready for a whole lot of what ifs, not for what is. And when you take yourself out of the game mentally, it's very hard to just flip a switch and get yourself back into the game. Okay, so you have to make sure you know how to deal with, all right, I did make a bad call. All right, it's just one call. It's not the whole game. All right, the coach just asked me a question. Maybe I didn't have a good answer, but you know what? When we go in the locker room at halftime, I'm going to look that up so that I actually have a better way of responding to the coach using rule-based terminology as opposed to what I just threw out at him or her. Okay. Again, you become your own worst enemy when you allow all that stinking thinking to take over what's going on, as opposed to taking a step back, focusing on what it is that you're ill-equipped to deal with in that moment, and then think about, how do I need to deal with it? Or is now the time to even deal with it? Right. So at that point, we have to understand, with the stress being there and the stress being present, we know that the criticism will become part of the game. And who becomes critical of our officiating? Well, obviously the coaches. Again, they're critical because they're trying to gain an advantage so that their team can win. It's not personal. The fans, same thing. They want their team to win. Other officials sometimes are critical of our job on the court, as well as ourselves. Okay, so again, there is nothing wrong with self-critique. At the end of the game, I can think of several plays. I probably could have been in better position. It was the right call, but I could have been in better position to make that call, and then it didn't look like I was reaching for it. Or I could have given the coach a much better explanation. However, the game was moving, so I didn't have an opportunity to do that. That's self-criticism. That's good, because I'm teaching myself what I could be doing better. What I don't want to be doing is so overly critical that I'm second guessing, should I have made that travel call at 4:58? That's a minor thing, but if those are the things that I focus on, then I take my actual good thinking process away from what needs to be done. And oftentimes, and this is just a human characteristic, we do a good job of tuning others out if it's not stuff we want to hear, but we have a very difficult time tuning our own critical thinking out, right? So again, self-criticism is good when I'm critiquing. to help myself grow, but it's not good if I'm just beating the crap out of myself and I'm not growing from that. I'm not getting better. So what do we do when we are facing criticism? And now here comes the self-imposed pressure that comes along with it. Because pressure, if you think about it, if I put pressure on something, okay, if I have volcanic rock and there's a lot of pressure on it, well, what happens with all that pressure? It turns into a diamond. That's a good thing, right? But it's the same thing with us. If I start to feel a lot of stress and pressure, it's telling me it's time to do something. And if you don't act on the do, then the stress will continue to build up, which in turn brings more self-criticism, which in turn brings on more self-pressure. And that's not a good cycle that we want to be in. So we know where criticism comes from, then you have to understand, where does pressure come from? And again, pressure comes from ourselves and from other officials, from our assigners, because sometimes we ask for the big game and then we start getting them and then we find out we're not necessarily ready for it. And obviously from coaches and fans and players. All right. So if I know that stress and pressure and criticism are part of the game, and I know I've got to do something to change all that stress so that I'm not bringing it onto the court and not reacting in a favorable way, the first place I have to make a change is in my mindset. You have to understand you're the only one responsible for your career. So if you're not getting the big game, it's not fair to say, well, I don't know why Carrie Donahue keeps getting all the good games. I've been an official as long as her. Why aren't I getting the game? Okay. Again, you have no idea what Carrie Donahue has done behind the scenes in the off season, going to camp, having study groups, reviewing her rule book all the time. You have no idea what she's done to get to where she is, and that she may have had to wait for an opportunity, but when she got the opportunity, she made the most of it. So stop blaming other people for where your career is or isn't. You're the only one that's responsible for it. You need to think about how you want to improve your game. Then you got to study about what I need to do. And sometimes that means ask others. And that's one of the great things about the WCC and WICBO is there's a forum to bring women officials together and talk about issues, talk about situations. How did you get in? How did you get there? What did you do? What steps did you take? Because it's a shared experience for all of us. And again, even though it may not have been the same length of time, it's an experience that we all can take in and make sense for ourselves. What can you do to improve yourself? Okay. It's going to help change your mindset. Okay. The ultimate thing it's going to do is it's going to give you permission to succeed. And so if you set a goal for yourself, you know what, this is my 10th year and I've been getting varsity games for the last couple of years. And now I'm hoping that I can get a conference tournament or a state tournament recognition at the end of the season. And you get the email that says, you're going to be working the conference tournament or you're going to be working the state tournament. Give yourself permission to succeed and pat yourself on the back for a job well done. Unfortunately, sometimes we tell people, I want to be here. I want to be varsity. I want to make the conference or state tournaments. I want to be a college official. And then we get selected. And then the first thing that people say is, I don't know why they chose me. I don't know why all the coaches picked me. Well, why'd you work that hard if you didn't want to reach the goal? So give yourself permission to succeed. It's okay to reach your goals, regardless of what other people are going to think or feel. Give yourself permission to succeed. And then we as officials have to do a better job of patting people on the back and telling them congratulations, even if I didn't reach all my goals. I got to congratulate you on reaching yours because that's what's going to keep everyone in a positive mindset, both as individual officials, as a board, and as an IABO organization. Okay. Remember that even when we're right, we're going to get flack as officials. Everybody's a great ref. 17 rows up. They see everything that we can't see. And they yell and scream at us all game. And then as soon as we get out in the hallway, what do they all say? Hey, ref, great job tonight. Well, thank you. That's not what I heard from you. But again, remember, fans come from a certain place of how they perceive things. Again, not only do we want to set goals, we want to achieve goals, and you do that by visualizing what is success going to look like for you. If I want to be successful, what do the successful refs on my board do? They get to the game early. They come dressed professionally. They don't come in the gym and start talking to everybody like they're running for mayor. They just sit and observe. They go in the locker room with the sub-varsity officials or the younger officials, and they give them feedback about what they could be doing better on the court. They go in the locker room. They have a thorough pregame. They allow the younger officials to come in and listen, take notes. They go in at halftime. They make adjustments on what they're doing in the game if needed. Then they go out and implement what they're going to do. At the end of the game, they go back in the locker room. They talk about what went well, what could have been better, and then they talk about individual things that they've done, not just as a crew, but as an individual officials. That's what I like to do in the locker room. I like to ask my partner, what could I have done better? How could I have been a better crew chief for you? Is there anything I could have done to make tonight easier for you? I want to know so that I get better. And if you're afraid to go in the locker room and ask, then you have to ask yourself, are you ready to reach the goals that you're setting for yourself? Again, criticism is part of the game. We have to be willing to take in some of the criticism, and some of it you're going to realize that sometimes people are going to tell you things to tear you down because that makes them feel better about themselves. You've got to learn how to weed through that stuff. But the stuff that you're hearing that you feel like it is apropos for you, take it and internalize it. What do I need to do with this now in order to keep moving on? All right. Again, thinking about what we do as an individual official, as a crew, and as a board. What does your board foster? Okay. Do they foster confidence in their officials? Whether you're a first-year official or a 31st year official, you want to feel confident going on the court, whether you're doing that middle school game or the big game on Friday night. Do they foster teamwork? Is it important when you go into the locker room to feel like you and your partner are making a connection? For most people, they would say yes. Or does your board foster anxiety? Because I often have officials, especially the younger officials, email me, call me, text me. Hey, Miss Charlene, what do you do when you go to the game and your partner won't have a pregame? So you know what I tell them? Go in the locker room and start talking about, hey, I'm new. This is what I'm going to be working on. Most people will start to engage you in a conversation at that point, but take the lead. It's going to feel a little bit scary, but talk from an I standpoint. I'm going to work on, I'm going to do this. I'm looking for some feedback from you. Okay. Does your board foster worry? Okay. Are you worried about what game assignments you're getting? Are you worried about what partners you're going to have? Are you worried about whether or not you're going to get out of the gym alive that night? That's a concern. Okay. And again, those are things that you should be sharing with people on your board so that we make sure we're addressing and dealing with it. Even if it's something as simplistic as walking out of the gym at night with your partner so you don't feel unsafe walking to your car. Okay. Again, does your board foster a Billy Martin or a Joe Torre mindset? Okay. And if you're a baseball fan, you know the difference between Billy Martin and Joe Torre. I'm a Yankees fan. That's why I use that analogy. But if you're not a baseball fan, we'll go to basketball. Does your board foster Bobby Knights or Phil Jacksons? Okay. So again, are they doing things to bolster that community of support, of success, of reaching goals, or are they fostering the stress and the criticism and the pressure? Okay. So again, think about what is going on in your board and how do you contribute to that as an official? So again, if we know that stress is part of what goes on in life and stress is part of what we do as officials, then if we recognize the causes and the signs and the symptoms of stress, then we want to do anything and everything we can to minimize that, preferably before the season starts. But if we can't, then if it's happening when the season is actually going on, what can I do to hit pause on that stress so I can still go out on the court and do what needs to be done? Do you have an anchor statement, something that helps ground you so in the moment you don't feel yourself leaving the game? So what can you say to yourself? This too shall pass. If I just had a bad call, it's going to be okay. Just focus on the next play. Make your first call a strong call. How can I be ready in the first 2 minutes of the game? Okay, so again, developing healthy and positive statements that I can say to myself to keep myself focused and present in the moment instead of letting my mind take me somewhere else. So again, we develop healthy and positive stress management skills by being prepared. And how do we prepare as officials? Review your rule book. I think I've already gone through the new handbook 3 times, and every time I go through, I find something different that I didn't see the last time. And I have a core group of, excuse me, officials who are also my close friends that we talk every night after we have games. Sometimes I will send them little scenarios just to kind of get their feedback and we kind of process through it. Or they'll send me actual scenarios from the game they had that night. But we are constantly talking basketball. And when you're constantly talking basketball, looking for answers as opposed to critique, it puts you in a good mindset, okay? Take the refresher exam and don't worry about your score. Worry about whether or not you're actually understanding the questions, understanding the rule book, understanding the terminology, okay? I did a game with an official this year, varsity official, veteran varsity official, and in our pregame, I talked about points of emphasis. We want freedom of movement. And if we see anything that's disrupted with RSBQ, we want to make sure that we get on it. Was the contact that occurred illegal or incidental? And my partner said to me, what's RSBQ? I felt a little pang of stress in that moment, but I also have to understand people are processing so much stuff throughout the day with work and home and family. Again, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And when I started to actually expand, and they were like, oh, yeah, I got it. But again, that's something that could have set somebody else off and been like, oh my God, if my partner doesn't know RSBQ, what else don't they know? Okay, so again, take the refresher exam. Sometimes I take out the old refresher exams. I'll just randomly do 10 questions just to kind of get myself into thinking about other scenarios beyond just the basic things. Again, go to your yearly interpretation meeting, not just because it's a requirement, but because you know there's going to be some new changes that are coming out. I want to make sure I understand the rules and the points of emphasis. Again, as we talked about before, having an environment on your organization and your board. How do you contribute? Do you contribute to an environment that's healthy? If you're going to do that, you have to lead by example. If you're not sure how to lead, then follow people that you feel are making the correct example. Speak positively of other officials, especially if you're around newer officials or younger officials. Don't bash your board, don't bash your president, don't bash, because then the newer person is starting to think, well, what did I just get myself into? Right? And again, it's going to contribute to some stress and some strain for them because they aren't really sure yet what to do or what to think. So contribute to your environment and your culture in a healthy way. As I said before, how else do we reduce stress as officials? Have a thorough pregame, halftime, post-game discussion. Your connection with your partner starts actually a few days before you even get to your gym. Just confirming your game, letting you know what time your partner is going to be there. I always tell my partners, I'm going to be there for the JV game unless there isn't one, and then I usually let them know that, okay? If you are having some concerns about the game or partners or how to deal with certain situations, talk to someone that you trust or respect. Because again, if someone's been around 20 or 30 or 40 years, chances are the question that you're going to ask is not silly and not stupid. They've seen it, they've heard it, they've experienced it. They'll give you some valuable insight as to how you can deal with that situation. If you have the opportunity, attend camps, or as Carrie and Val just put up, go to a conference, go to the spring conference, go to the fall conference. Even if you're not an interpreter on your board, go just so that you hear other presentations. You start to meet other people. You start to, find out that you're not the only new official on the planet. You start to go figure out who actually is writing the rule book, who are writing the exam questions, who are the people that are doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. It will help enhance your learning, not of just the game, but of the organization in and of itself. And as I said before, be happy for other people's successes. You have no idea what people have done and how long they've waited to reach their goal. Be happy for them and understand that your time will come. And so we know that stress is manifest in 4 ways. We want to address our self-care in those 4 ways as well. So physically, how do we care for ourselves? Well, start the season off by getting a physical. Stop being afraid to go to the doctor. Okay. One of the things that I can say and I can share is, when things kind of shut down in 2020 with COVID, I was actually scheduled for my first ever colonoscopy. And I have to actually admit, I was not looking forward to it. I've heard all the horror stories about all the medicine you got to take and what your body's going to betray you with for the next 24 hours. However, mine got put on hold. So it was out of sight, out of mind. And then last year, finally, when things started open back up, I got a call from my doctor's office saying, okay, we're scheduling colonoscopies again. So I scheduled my colonoscopy and I went and picked up my baggie of medicine and I started taking the medicine and did everything I needed to do. And I went in and had my colonoscopy and I was like, this wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And again, over and done with. Well, 2 days later, my doctor called and asked me to come into the office, and my doctor proceeded to tell me that they found a mass on my colon. All right. So again, I'm not the type of person that avoids doctors or doctor's appointments, but it was not something I was expecting to hear or something I was prepared to deal with. And there had to be some very quick decisions that were made because the thing that my doctor kept emphasizing was we need to get in and we need to get to that mass, and the sooner we do it, the better. And so it was a tough call to have with my family, but it was a tougher call to say to my assigner, hey, you have to take me off the schedule for a little while because I don't know how long this is going to take. And he wished me the best of luck because his first response to me was, Charlene, your health comes first. I can find someone to replace you. Okay, so I went in and we had the surgery and I come out and my doctor comes in and says, okay, it wasn't as bad as we thought, but we did biopsy. I ended up just taking out your appendix. And so I only ended up missing a couple of weeks and the biopsy was fine. But again, had I not listened to the doctor and scheduled the colonoscopy and gone in and done what I needed to do, who knows where that might have gone. So again, get a physical, take your doctor appointments seriously. Something doesn't feel right, go get it checked out. Make healthy choices, even if they're small. As I always say, I'm a chocoholic. I realize a giant Hershey bar is not what I need. So sometimes just getting a small bag of Hershey Kisses and having 1 or 2 of those is enough to just satiate me for a few days. But again, some people will say, well, don't eat candy at all. Not realistic. So it's better to make a small, healthy choice than to try to tell yourself, I'm not going to eat candy. And then you're just going to give in and you're going to imbibe in a way that you shouldn't. Again, get in shape for the season and then try to go to bed early or the same time every night. Give your body time to rest, but also give your mind time to rest because your brain needs just as much of downtime as your body physically does. And again, my core group of friends, they make fun of me. They'll be sending me messages and then typically somebody will write, it's 8:45, Charlene's in bed already, which generally speaking, if I'm home, I am. But I wake up sometimes in the morning to 47 text messages, and I got to read through all of them to see what they were talking about. And, they make fun of me for that. But again, I am up early with the chickens as well. So the fact that I'm in bed, that early, it's because I get up early. So I want to make sure I give myself plenty of time to rest and recuperate for the next day. Socially, how do we give ourselves self-care? Again, connect yourself to positive people Positive people feed into you, and that will help keep you in a positive place, okay? Share your experiences as an official with others, the good and the bad. That's how we grow. That's how we learn. That's how we make changes, okay? Ask how you can support others and allow other people to support you. Don't ever feel like you've got to deal with what's going on as an official alone. That's why we are here as a board, as an organization. We are your family. We're here to support you. Get a mentor. Even if your board doesn't have a mentor committee, get a mentor, somebody, again, that you trust and respect, and trust that they're going to lead you and guide you in the right way. So trust their feedback, trust their observations, and then implement it. Again, especially if they're the people that are where you want to be, trust their instinct and their guidance into getting you where you need to be as well. Mentally, how do we care for ourselves? Again, do things that are mindful. So again, take 5 or 10 minutes out of the day just to sit quietly. No phone, no texting, no laptop, no interacting with others. Just give yourself some space for quietness, okay? Allow yourself to think positive even when you're feeling negative, okay? And if the negative continues to persist, do something to change that, whether it's turn on some music or turn on a TV show that you like, or again, put yourself around some positive people. It will help change your perspective. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. If you know you worked hard and you still didn't get the conference tournament or the state tournament, but you worked hard that season, again, pat yourself on the back for working hard that season and tell yourself, I'm coming back next year to do the same things, and hopefully next year I reach that goal. Don't beat yourself up because you didn't get that goal this year, okay? When in doubt, reach out and talk. Emotionally, how do we take care of ourselves? Again, depending on who you are and how you are, write a journal. Get your negative feelings out. Oops, sorry. Going backwards there. Okay. Write things that you're thankful for. I have what I call a thankful jar. So just a little mason jar. When positive things happen throughout the week, regardless of what it's about, I just write it on a little piece of paper. I crumble it up, I put it in the jar. And then every year on New Year's Eve, I take the jar, I open it, I dump all the crumbles of paper out, and I just go back through all the papers. And it's just a reminder to me that no matter what 2020 felt like or 2022 felt like, look at all the positive things that happened this year, some of which I remember, most of which I don't, but it's, again, a way to just put me in a better place of mind of, I am thankful for the fact that I had this year, that I had these opportunities, and I could go into that next year already being thankful for another chance to just be here on the planet. Learn a new skill or hobby. Again, listen to some music, read a book, or watch a movie that you normally wouldn't, okay? Or create some sense of calm, and however that works for you, whether it's yoga or meditation or prayer, do something to just bring yourself back down to baseline. So I asked earlier in this presentation if we are tough, and how do you determine if you're tough? And I'm going to say that for the most part, I absolutely believe that most officials, especially IABLE officials, we are tough, and we are tough because we are willing to do the work that needs to be done to be good officials, good partners, good leaders, set good examples. We are able to think ourselves through difficult situations. We know how to quiet that inner voice. We know how to move on to the next play. And again, we do those things not just because it's what works best for us, but it's what works best for our crew. It's what works best for the players, and it is what works best for the game. Remember that the key to success is in your hands, and that if you want to reach your potential as an official, you have to have the fire inside. You can't just go through the motions on the court, because eventually your partners will see through it, the coaches will see through it, the players will see through it, your assigner will see through it. That fire is what's going to make you want to do, to act, to be prepared, okay? Make yourself someone who handles hard well. Don't wait for things to get easy, because it's never going to get easy for us as officials, especially as you keep moving up. But as you move up, it's going to get more rewarding for you, because now you realize the game starts to slow itself down, even though the players may be moving relatively quickly. And as I said before, at some point in time, we are all going to leave this game. And when you get ready to leave the game, it's going to leave a void in you, especially if you know you did everything you could do to do it the right way. Okay, so again, please understand that. So if you want to take your game to the next level, did you reach your goals from last year? If you haven't reached them, are you in the process of working towards them this season? We know the game keeps evolving. We're way beyond peach baskets and 3-on-3, and the offense can't cross, the defense can't cross. We're way beyond that. And the more the game evolves, we as officials have to be ready to evolve with it. You have to be ready for change, okay? And so ultimately, as an official, you have to understand, again, there will be stress, there will be pressure, there will be criticism. You have to put it in a silo and deal with it if it needs to be dealt with. Understand you're going to make mistakes, and mistakes are fine. The only time the mistake becomes an issue is when you acknowledge you've made a mistake and then you stop trying. We all make mistakes. No official is perfect. And if you ever meet an official that tells you they did a perfect game, turn and walk away, because that's not possible. Build good habits, and you build good habits by being repetitive about what you do. So again, always have a thorough pregame. Always have a thorough postgame. Talk about what's going on. Tewksbury says in his book, without a strong foundation, success, it will come, but it won't stay. Okay? And even worse, it may become elusive. And we know that those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. And so again, as an official, you want to be good at your craft, build a strong foundation. Our foundation as officials is built on the rules and the rule book. Get that under your belt. There's never going to be a situation that you can't handle out there on the court. So I am a Sinatra fan. And again, I know this surprises some people, but I am. But Sinatra said it best. And he says that if you can make it here, then you can make it anywhere. And I strongly believe that for us as officials, especially IABLE. I think our organization does the best at training and educating our officials so that when you do step out on the court, you do feel prepared to handle whatever is going on out on that court in front of you. And so with that being said, I am done with my presentation. Again, I appreciate your time for having me here today. And if there's anything I can ever do for you with your specific organization, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, a lot of times they'll ask me about presentations. There are tons of presentations out there, some of which have been around, some of which are brand new. So again, I'm willing to share what I know with everyone so that we all end up being better at what we do. Take care and continue to have a great season.